Gregory, thanks so much for joining us today. I am, and Jennifer, great to be on stage with you again.
My pleasure.
Gregory, let me just open, and Jennifer and I are going to have some fun here and grill you. How good is it to be you in a Trump world?
A great question, but I would say it is pretty good to be not just Gregory T. Angelo, but to be a log cabin Republican right now. We have access to a number of arms of the Trump administration, cabinet secretaries, and even the White House itself. And for people who might actually be, skeptical, of a Trump administration, clearly we have some in the audience today, I think you need to understand that it's important to have those voices advocating on behalf of the LGBT community to people within this administration, because as the old saying goes, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. My pleasure to be here. Being me in the Trump era turned out to be a lot more exciting than I thought it was going to be. But I think
What is the actual name of your column?
The Right Turn blog at the Washington Post. I think all of us, whether gay, straight, Jewish, Christian, conservative, ex-Republican, have to make a choice, because it's a moral question, I think, not a political question that we've arrived at. And that is, to what degree do you cooperate and facilitate, enable an administration that you believe is not just politically wrong, but morally corrupt and to some degree evil? And I think people who went into the administration, many in the foreign policy community who we know quite well, had this same dilemma. Does a Jim Mattis, does a H.R. McMaster go into an administration knowing it's going to be a little bit of a shit show, or do they stay out because they really don't want to sully themselves by being involved? I have a Jim Mattis rule, by the way, which is Jim is allowed to stay so that we don't have a nuclear war. He's the only one. And everyone else can go. For me personally, the administration has crossed so many red lines of democratic norms, of human decency, of civility, of racism, of xenophobia, that I'm appalled. I go through life appalled.
So in Greg's role, and I have a lot of respect for log cabin Republicans, because I'm also believe engaging, all sides. Greg, I'm just sort of interested. I was there in Cleveland when President Trump said he was going to be the best president ever to the LGBTQ. He had to get that Q out.
What he said is he would protect the LGBTQ community from the hateful ideology of radical Islam. Right. That was the actual quote from the Republican National Convention.
No, that wasn't the actual quote. I mean, he said it was going to be the best president of the community in general. It wasn't just about radical Islam. Yeah, we can go back. I mean, I was there in the middle of it, and I was just astounded that he said it. So, we'll go back and we'll have a drink after, and we can check it. But
okay, deal.
You've said this administration is and I'll quote directly, the most pro-LGBT president in history, and I don't want to ridicule you. I just want to understand, because we've seen, the comments on the transgender ban, which Jennifer just raised very, very interesting questions about, the moral standing of this White House. I'm interested in where we are. I don't know if it's a fact or true, but I am understanding that members of the LGBT press corps were not invited to any of the holiday parties. That is something going on.
That's
I'll have
stunning.
to kind of check it out right
That's
now.
Stunning.
So I'm just wondering, in that world, how do you navigate it? I mean, what are you trying to win, and what are your red lines? I mean, Jennifer laid out some of her red lines. What are some of your red lines as you?
Well, first let me back up and talk about some of the pro-LGBT things that Trump has done. Trump is actually the first president of either party, Democrat or Republican, to enter the White House believing that marriage equality is the, quote, settled law of the land. We have President Trump maintaining a pro-LGBT non-discrimination executive order that everyone on the left was anticipating him to nullify maybe hours after he took office. We have in Trump an individual who is appointing openly gay individuals to key positions positions within his administration, including members of log cabin Republicans. These are all things to celebrate. But I do want to point out, getting to the latter part of your question, and for those folks who maybe aren't following the work of log cabin Republicans around the clock, I mean, we are not Trump apologists, and we are not people who are out there defending anything and everything that this president has said or done. In fact, I would say that we are the most consistent LGBT advocacy organization out there because we have praised this administration when praise is due, and we have criticized this administration when that criticism is due for things like rescinding the order for open service on transgender individuals in the military. We criticized President Trump and this administration for rolling back guidance for transgender students. And we, subsequent to that—
Have you talked to him about Roy Moore?
I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that because we put out a video that quickly went viral just on Friday urging, quote, good Christians to do what good Christians do, and that is to stand up for Christian morals and to reject Roy Moore. So no, we're certainly not standing with this administration in support of Roy Moore.
Jennifer, I know you're very pro-LGBT in your formulation of things. Where do you think the Republican Party is today in either locking down, those pro-LGBT views, or walking away from some things you thought were important?
Let me just pick up on one point, and then I'll get to yours. This is a variation of the but Gorsuch argument that many conservatives put forth. Yes, he's done all these horrible things. Yes, he's racist. Yes, he's a xenophobe. Yes, he's mentally unbalanced. But he's got but tax reform or but deregulation. There has to be a point at which there is no justification for some of these things. Is that working better there?
Yeah.
Where there is no justification, because otherwise you accept.
Can we get a mic out here, please?
Otherwise,
Yeah, thank you.
thank you. Otherwise, you accept the clearly unacceptable, and there has to be a point at which you say nothing justifies this behavior. As to the direct question about the movement, for clearly the most bizarre relationship in American politics, you have a man who has no Christian virtues, who has made alliance with the so-called Christian right. I've written a lot about this. I think it reflects horribly on those faith leaders who have chosen to be political players, not moral and faith leaders of their flock. But that is probably his strongest alliance. You see it in all the polls. They're over 70%. Whatever he says, they're with him. Whatever he believes, they're with him. And he has bent over backwards to accommodate them on everything from transgender, where he gave them more than they were actually asking for, to obviously their litigation positions. So I think, listen, every political party, every group has tensions, but you can't have a tension so great that you're going to give the Christian right everything they want and yet also be good to the LGBT community. You can say, I'll accept them because I like them for X, Y, and Z. That's the but Gorsuch argument. But you can't say that those two things can be reconciled. Right. You can't be for Hitler and the Jews. You can't be for freedom and repression.
I just want to piggyback
go ahead, Greg.
on what Jennifer was saying, because it bears mentioning. I mean, yes, Donald Trump ran up the numbers with 81% of the evangelical vote. Staggering, far more than Mitt Romney got, certainly far more than John McCain got. But this illuminates the reason why log cabin Republicans or LGBT Republicans are important and necessary, because if you put all your faith into a single political party, your destiny is to be ignored by one and taken for granted by the other. That's what's happening right now with the evangelical community, where evangelicals feel that they have been so dismissed by Democrats that yes, they are going with someone who doesn't necessarily espouse the values that they purport to hold.
I'm going to hijack your panel. I take exception to that because that's an argument for normal political times. We are in abnormal, once in a lifetime, I pray, times when I am willing to make a pact with any Democrat who will oppose this president. I'm willing to vote Democratic. I'm willing to support them because the issues on which I disagree with people like Steve Clemons pale in comparison to the urgent issues before us. We're talking about the survival of democracy. We're talking about whether we maintain ourselves as a nation of immigrants. These are meta issues that are so far above the day-to-day. I'll go back to fighting with Steve Clemons and all my newfound friends. Yes, in fact, I pined for the time when I could argue with him about top marginal tax rates. It's not.
And believe me, we have.
It's not that important. The house is burning down. Right. I'll argue about the wallpaper later.
So Greg, I love you too, Jen. You guys would not know how big of our fights have been in the past. But Greg, Greg, the president has appointed someone I know, Rick Grinnell, to be ambassador to Germany, and he is a leading gay voice. I have respect for Rick, and I don't think he's been confirmed yet, but he's an example of an appointee of an LGBT appointee in this administration. So I get that, and when I meet with H.R. McMaster or Jim Mattis or various people in the intelligence community or the national security community, I feel like you do. I want them to sort of know everything they can because these are life and death issues, and somebody has to be in there engaging, and so I do engage and I do talk to them. But I'm just wondering, in terms of a advocacy community, and I do believe strongly that I want to see a healthy Republican Party, and I want to see a healthy Republican Party that is actually a pro-civil rights Republican Party and that understands about transgender rights and lesbian and gay. We're going to have a panel right after this with various members of the transgender community who are looking at this. But I have to say, compared to last year when we had trans, I feel like that world in trans area is so fragile that the ice is threatening to break. And I just find at some point I don't want to challenge your enthusiasm for Trump in the sense, but I want to understand it because I don't understand how your enthusiasm remains as robust as it is, given the fragility that we're seeing hit a very important part of the LGBT community, perhaps other parts of the community.
Well, I mean, I guess speaking from a practical and I dare say realistic standpoint, let's actually look at where we are 13 months since election day of 2016 and about 12 months since the inauguration. Largely status quo. Right, largely status quo. The only tangible thing that we have seen change is a call for a rollback of the open service for transgender individuals that was a policy that was implemented at the tail end of President Obama's time in office. And again, I would underline the fact that any such rollback is something that Log Cabin Republicans has explicitly opposed. We have been lobbying the Department of Defense, et cetera. But we have not had federal LGBT non-discrimination protections. We're fighting to make that happen at Log Cabin Republicans, working in concert with LGBT organizations largely affiliated with the left. You're seeing leadership coming, not from the president on those issues, but actually from Republicans in the House of Representatives specifically. I think it's important to point out there's a gentleman by the name of Scott Taylor, a Republican from Virginia, freshman Republican, former Navy SEAL, and he made history this past year by being the first ever Republican to author and introduce a piece of LGBT non-discrimination legislation. It's called the Fair and Equal Housing Act. I'd encourage people to look it up. But in 2017, I think there are a number of individuals, whether they're in Log Cabin Republicans or not, who do not feel attacked in the way by the Trump administration that some on the left and even folks like Jennifer, I think, might be describing. There's a survey that came out today by Harvard Business Review that said that gay men actually earn more than their straight counterparts today, right? I don't believe that it was.
I'm just talking about the numbers, and yes, there's some legitimacy to. I mean, I don't know the crosstabs on that survey, so I'm not going to comment on that. But I'm just saying that there is certainly a segment of the population out there in lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender that does not feel that the sky is falling.
Jennifer, I mean, just as we wrap this up, I'd like to know from you how you as a columnist and a commentator look at this question of, we don't have a monolithic lesbian gay community. We don't have a monolithic political slant of the lesbian and gay and bisexual and transgender community. I am interested in what you would advocate for those communities in this time.
I think the problem with the position is it's too narrow and too selfish. You have to raise your eyes. If this president is attacking Muslim Americans, do you think LGBT people are going to be secure and enjoy full rights? If they are supporting for the United States Senate, vigorously supporting with money and everything, someone who preys on children and women, you think they're going to be good for the LGBT community? I don't. So I think we all have to stop thinking about our narrow, selfish little interests. I want a bunch of stuff too. I'm wildly pro-trade. I'm wildly pro-immigration. I am a free marketer. But I'm going to put that aside because the house is burning down.
She could be a log cabin Republican almost.
Yeah, in better times I was.
Allies. We welcome straight allies.
In better times I was, actually. And I'll take a little credit for having broken down CPAC and held the first LGBT panel that they ever permitted. We were given a little room in the corner, sort of a broom closet. But I think we have to think big picture. And what I would say to LGBT Americans and all Americans is there are some fundamental responsibilities and issues in a democratic society. Equality for all, the rule of law, a sane chief executive. And if you don't have those, nothing else matters. So I think we need a bipartisan, apartisan, nonpartisan alliance to deal with the threats to our democracy, to get this president out of office, and then we can go back to making a lot of these decisions, a lot of these debates.
Thank you. And I'm going to give you the last word, Gregory, in the sense, I want to, since you mentioned CPAC, Steve Bannon is a big player in CPAC. I know that Log Cabin has become a substantial part of CPAC.
Yep.
There's Milo
Which was a
Yiannopoulos
fight, by the
out
way.
there.
You know?
I'm sorry?
Which was a fight, as Jennifer knows.
Yeah, a real fight. I know Grover Norquist and others were real advocates. I know that Frank Gaffney and others were real opponents. I've watched that very carefully, how it went. But there are personalities out there like Bannon and Milo Yiannopoulos and the Breitbart crowd, the alt-right crowd, and I know you have views on that. How, when you look at Donald Trump land and the importance of Bannon, who's connected to so much of that, how do you deal with it? And are you willing to engage it?
I mean, I don't want to skirt your question, but I can't say Bannon is really top of mind. You're someone who doesn't even work at the White House anymore, who's clearly pursuing his own agenda. I would say that if the agenda is to blow up the Republican Party, that's certainly not something that Log Cabin Republicans would support. But if we're short on time, I did just want to add maybe on a high note here. We have I actually brought it with me. We received a letter just a couple of days ago. Let me see if I can get it out here.
From President Trump?
Not from President Trump, but almost as good. Almost as good. It's from Ronna McDaniel, who's the chairwoman of the RNC. You know, the person who's in charge of the Republican Party today. We're also celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. We were founded in 1977. Thank you. It says, "Hello, Log Cabin Republicans. Congratulations on your 40th anniversary. Since your founding in 1977, you have proudly represented thousands of strong conservatives across the nation. As the nation's original and largest conservative organization advocating for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, the work you do is critical in supporting liberty and equality for all." I'll skip ahead. "Today we celebrate your decades of support for the LGBT community and its allies. On behalf of our party, we will continue to stand with the Log Cabin Republicans as you advance the ideals of freedom over oppression now and for years to come. Your voices make our party stronger and our nation greater." Chairwoman Ronna Romney McDaniel.
Well, congratulations on that letter. I look forward to having people that support Roy Moore read the letter and know about it.
It's publicly available, you know, but I would just point out, you know, this is something that mere years ago would be unthinkable. Having the head of the National Republican Party formally recognize the work of an LGBT organization and do so in no uncertain terms, right? Explicitly say the RNC stands with log cabin Republicans in your work advocating for not just LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community.
And with that, thank you, Gregory Angelo. Thank you very much for showing up here
Thank
today.
you.
Gregory Angelo, President of Log Cabin Republicans.
Jennifer
Rubin of Washington Post. Thank you both so much.